Yeah, subscribe to the channel. Victor madly loved his girlfriend Christina. They had been dating for several months, and recently the wedding was held. In fact, Christina became his bride, and everything would be fine. He could have been prepared to marry. However, Victor was a little nervous. Lately, he began to notice that Christina was secretly talking on the phone and disappeared without any explanation of the reason. On the one hand, it was possible to understand. Perhaps the girl was worried, so she gave herself a break in the form of a short absence of days. But the problem was that she did not tell Victor where she disappeared, and this led the groom to think that he could be led astray. At the same time, he could not openly tell her about it. He did not want to upset the wedding and, in general, spoil the relationship. Victor was from a rich family, but did not consider himself a major. The guy knew how to appreciate and count money, and did not allow himself more than what it was generally worth spending on. For example, some friends from his circle gave their favorite luxury car. Victor saw in this a pair of index bravado, and turned out to be right. Relationships in such cases did not get better between them. The girls only liked them and demanded more and more expensive gifts. When he was young, he was left without parents. They were hit by a car accident. His grandfather, Pyotr Borisovich, was a teacher. He taught his grandson to be smart and to be careful. And this despite the fact that Victor could afford to worry about nothing at all. The business of the deceased parents flourished and brought good income. At the same time, the grandfather did not allow the stranger to have money on the right and left. Thus, he created a pillow of safety for his grandson for the future. In this world, he had doubts about his daughter-in-law. Many factors came together. Victor remembered how his grandfather calculated everything in several moves, and for this reason he said, "You must feel another person. Imagine yourself as a player and understand how to make the next move to be in the ladies." Grandfather taught him a lot, and first of all, to see people through. It can be said that Pyotr Borisovich literally put this science into him, but he has not been alive for 2 years. That is why, armed with instructions and advice from his grandfather, Victor decided to check on Christina and made an agreement with a family friend, or rather, a very close person to Pyotr Borisovich, who worked as a head of the private clinic, that he would settle down with him for a while. Victor was officially hospitalized. Andrei Yevgenyevich tried his best. He, one might say, replaced his parents and did everything so that Victor would not feel lonely. At the same time, the request of the priest turned out to be unexpected for him. "Are you sure this will help?" Andrei Yevgenyevich asked. "I think so," Victor answered. "In any case, I will feel and check. You know, your action is, how to put it mildly." He wanted to continue as the head, but he hesitated. Well, what did they say? They wanted to say that he was cynical? Instead, Victor said this word. "To be honest, yes." Andrei Evgenievich nodded. "I just didn't have to face it like that. We have been together for almost years, and there were no reasons for distrust between us." "Exactly, you have been together for years," Victor supported him, "and I just have to build a family. And I want to know if my fiancée has a secret from me. I told you what's been going on with her lately." Yes, I remember." The headmaster was nodding. "Well, let's try." As agreed. "But if anything, I have nothing to do with it. I don't want Christina to hate me all her life later." "Great, Andrei Evgenievich, thank you." Victor shook his hand. The headmaster ordered that a separate ward be allocated for Vidya. He deliberately did not make the staff aware that the patient was a close person to him. He did not want to cancel the check, because the nurses could accidentally chat. As agreed, Andrei Evgenievich prepared a fake document about his health and personally called Christina to inform that Victor was in a coma. From the outside, it might seem that the priest is an extreme person and loves ruses. And in some way he was right. But only that Victor was not afraid of anything. Grandpa taught him to look fear right in the eye and not to step back. In this situation, Victor acted as his intuition suggested, and at the same time did not interfere with common thinking, making certain conclusions. During the call from the head of the family, Christina was at a party. It seems that she did not even worry that something could happen to her fiancé. After finding out from Andrei Yevgenyevich that Victor was in a coma, the girl hurried to come. She was met near the administration and taken to the ward. The ward manager went there with her. The patient was lying on a special functional bed, but unconscious. There was a tripod with a dropper next to it, and cameras were peeking from both sides, showing the general condition of the patient. Christina covered her mouth with her hand, and Andrei Evgenievich thought that she would cry now. He took out a handkerchief from his pocket and stretched his girls. "Take it, and that soul will spread all over your face." "Thank you, don't. I've already taken myself into my hands." Christina refused. "Doctor, how did this happen?" He turned off in the car when he was driving. Andrei Evgenievich answered, "It was an accident?" "What a horror." "No, there was no accident." Before turning off, Victor managed to press the brake, and the car just stopped in the middle of the road. DPS officers passed by, and they found him. "Tell me, how long will he stay in this state?" Christina asked excitedly, showing her hand to the sleeping Victor. "So far, I can't say anything definitive." Andrei Evgenievich was silent. "It all depends on the body and on how effective our treatment will be. But at least approximately it was on her own, Christina. Maybe a few days, maybe even months." Pasha answered the head of the hospital with his shoulders. What a horror, said Christina. "And we were going to get married. I already informed all my relatives that I am getting married. What should I do now, doctor?" "Well, just wait, honey." I patted her on her shoulder, and Andrei Evgenievich replied, "Well, I'll leave you alone. You probably need to think." "Yes, of course." Andrei Evgenievich glanced at Victor, pulling out his eyebrows. And from this look, the priest barely gave himself up with the scum. He not only heard, but also watched what was happening. He just tried to do it unnoticed so that Christina would not guess anything. And when the priest transferred his gaze to him, he almost laughed. He had to make great efforts to hold on and continue pretending to be asleep. When he left the room, Andrei Evgenievich took a deep breath and spoke to himself. But he didn't notice anything. At this moment, the nurse passed by, and hearing that the head nurse was whispering something, she carefully asked, "Do you want something, Andrei Evgenievich?" "No, not yet. Go to work." He waved at her with his hand and went to his office. Staying alone, Christina sat on the edge of the bed and took Victor by the hand. She looked at him carefully and smiled slightly. Perhaps this was a defensive reaction. In any case, Victor thought so, noticing a smile on her face. Continuing to portray a person in a coma, he showed indomitable talents. This wife had to lie so still and not react to external irritants. Christina tried to wake him up with a bullet in the head. Victor barely managed to endure the pain. Not a single muscle was trembling on his face, and the hand did not twitch, as it usually happens with a person who is pierced with a sharp object in the skin. No, Victor brilliantly played his role. It was only left to wait for the bride to take on the next step. And she didn't make herself wait long. Christina took her phone out of her handbag and began to call someone. Victor strained all possibilities of hearing. Having waited for the answer from the subscriber, the bride agreed to work with him. "Hello. Yes, I missed you too. We should have been together, right?" The interlocutor seemed to have responded positively, and Christina continued. "You won't believe it, honey, but this rich man himself went to the hospital. I didn't even have to poison him." Victor barely got out of the role and didn't jump off the bed, hearing the same from his fiancée. That's what he really didn't expect, so it's his own death. It seems that Christina was preparing an attempt on him and was going to use poison, but his coma saved him from this execution. It was even scary to imagine what he would have to experience. Victor's knees under the blanket were shaking. However, Christina didn't notice it because she continued to talk on the phone. "The matter is almost in the past," the bride continued. "It remains only to make an agreement with the nurse and to put something in the dropper." Victor had a heart attack, but it's good that the devices only imitated the work. Otherwise, Christina would have calmed down and would call the doctor. However, everything went well, and Victor coped with the excitement. At the same time, he was shocked that his fiancée planned to use the nurse for the murder. It seems that he had doubts about her, and it's right that he decided to imitate the coma. He managed to bring Christina to the clear water. Together with him, he decided not to reveal himself yet. It was necessary to give the fiancé time for active actions. Christina finished the conversation, kissed him in the cheek, and as if nothing had happened, left the ward. A few minutes later, Andrei Evgenievich came. "Well, how was the meeting with the bride?" "Bad, very bad," said Victor. What is it? Didn't even cry? The manager was curious, without suspecting that what really happened. You won't believe it, but she wanted to kill me, said Victor. Wow, what a number! Waving his head, Andrei Yevgenyevich answered. How unexpected. And what did it mean? Well, her desire to kill you. Victor told the god that Christina was talking to someone on the phone. She talked so nicely to the subscriber that it was not difficult to guess that perhaps this is a lover. She admitted to him that she did not have to poison the groom because he himself had fallen into the hospital. At this point, Victor took a break and then continued. And what is the most disgusting thing? Christina was going to make an agreement with the nurse to stab me in the dorsal fin. Don't be afraid, this will definitely not happen. Calm him down, Andrei Evgenyevich. All the procedures, well, you yourself understand that you will supposedly be done by Tatiana. She is already warned about everything, and no one from the medical staff will come here except her. What if Christina, Victor suggested, she won't do anything to you? Having put his hand on his shoulder, the manager replied, you won't be able to make a deal with the nurses. I'm controlling them completely. If she doesn't add anything yet, because you will receive her from the restaurant. My relative works there. You know him, Oleg Pavlovich. Yes. Uncle Pasha often came to visit his grandfather, agreed Victor. Well, so there's nothing to worry about. Andrew Yevgenyevich summed it up. By the way, maybe we should call the police on her? No, we don't need to do that yet. Victor stopped him with a gesture of his hand. Let's see what she does, and then we will act according to the situation. Okay. As you say, priest. If anything, I'm in my office. Thank you, Andrei Evgenyevich. I am very grateful to you. Victor thanked him. The manager left the ward, leaving him alone. Victor really needed to think seriously, and first of all about what to do with Christina. It would be more correct, of course, to reveal and say that there is no coma and part with her. But something hinted at Vitya that this role should be played to the end. The inner feeling said that interesting events await him ahead. At the same time, the unresolved question remained. Who was Christina talking to? It would be reasonable to assume that this is a lover. She was so nice to him. However, Victor also suggested another option. The subscriber could just be a partner of his fiancée. And in this case, the situation got worse. Because he would have agreed to remove Victor instead of her, and no one would notice anything, since everyone would expect actions from Christina. Thinking about this, Victor prepared himself for any turn, and carefully checked all the food that was delivered to him from the restaurant. There was a laboratory in the clinic, and Nurse Tatiana gave it for analysis. But there was nothing there, and Victor calmly ate everything. Several days passed since Christina came to him. She did not appear anymore, and this led to the thought that the bride was cooking something. In the tiring expectations of any action from her side, Victor decided to hire a detective. There was one such agency in the city where his acquaintance worked. Dmitri arrived on the same day as Victor called him. Not understanding what was going on, he first threw himself to bed and flinched. God, your competitors have done something to you. Calm down, Dima. Victor smiled in response. This is all a farce. It must be so. I decided to check on my fiancée, and it turned out that she wanted to poison me. No way. It's Christina. Out of surprise, the detective asked again. Exactly. Victor nodded. And what do you think to do next? I want you to make a report on her, Victor suggested. Collect everything you can find, and most importantly, monitor what she does. She hasn't come to me for several days, no matter what the anti-prosecutor thinks. I understand. I'll do everything. The detective nodded. Don't worry about your safety. Everything will be under control. Yes, the peasant is watching me. Victor waved. It's okay. My help in this matter will not interfere either. He insisted on his detective. Okay, Dim, I hope you'll do it. Victor slapped him on the shoulder. Don't even doubt it. The detective nodded. I'll try to collect as much information as possible about it. After minutes, Dmitri left. Then the nurse Tatiana appeared and brought the juice. Oleg Pavlovich asked to pass on the message. Thank you, and say hello to him from me. Victor thanked her. The nurse left, and he again thought about whether he had done the right thing by starting this game. On the one hand, he learned a lot new about the bride. On the other hand, he destroyed his happiness. After all, now there was no wedding and no speech could be made. In light of these events, it was worth thinking about your own safety. Christina, as he understood, turned out to be that fruit and could use any option to send him to that world. Together with that, unexpectedly, in the walls of this clinic, he met a childhood friend. Alina worked as a surgeon here, only in another department. 3 years ago, her son and husband died. This happened during their joint trip to Nuremberg. Alina then persuaded Timur to go, because it was raining outside the window. But her husband assured her that the weather would get better and nothing would bother them. She felt with her heart that they shouldn't go. And 2 hours later, she was told that an accident had occurred. Alina literally tore her hair off herself because her sister went there with her. Almost nothing was left of the car, only the burned-out island. The DPS officers did not let her near the remains. There were still doctors there and collected the dead in black bags. 3 days later, the funeral took place. Alina barely held herself back during the ceremony of forgiveness. Next to her was still Svetlana's sister. She did not step back. After the funeral, Alina came to her senses for a week, trying to make up with the fact that she no longer had a husband and son. She was eager to start a relationship with someone again. For her, all men in the world ceased to exist. As for Victor, once in school years there was a teenage romance between them, which did not end with anything. They met, spent time together, helped each other to do lessons. But in the end, after school, their paths parted. By the way, it was Svetlana who often passed notes to Victor from Alina. In them she spoke of high feelings and plans for the future. Soon Victor went to enter another city, and communication between them finally stopped. Alina became a student at a medical institute and decided to make her career a doctor. She was interested in chemistry and biology with a school bench. Teachers in one voice claimed that if a great scientist does not grow from her, then a high-class specialist. In principle, almost everything worked out. Only instead of a scientist, Alina received a position as a surgeon. After learning that Victor was in their clinic, she hurried to visit him. And what was her surprise when, instead of a comatose patient, she suddenly found a healthy and cheerful man. Naturally, she immediately had a question. And how to understand this video? I'll explain everything now. Do you see, I have doubts about my fiancé. Christina has been acting strange lately, and recently she found out that she wanted to kill me. Are you serious? Surprisingly, Alina asked. Absolutely. So I had to portray a comatose patient. Yes, you came up with an original way. And I, like a crazy one, ran to your room, thinking that you were really in a bad state. Ran, you say? Victor asked again in a jittery tone. Well, she took a quick step. Uncertain and reddened, Alina answered, I see. The man was firmly nodding and thinking about himself. It seemed she didn't forget me. These thoughts were only about the fact that Victor had assumed sympathy between them, and he was not mistaken. Alina suggested not only to participate in his comedy, but also to take care of it. And the first thing she did was, it was her job to bring food from the house. As a result, Victor had to give up the service of the restaurant. But he didn't regret it at all because Alina was amazingly good at cooking. In the end, he realized that he also had a sympathy for her. The school years and the date under the moon were immediately remembered. Victor was even glad that everything happened so. At the same time, he did not stop waiting for the news from the detective with excitement. Dmitri promised to give a report as soon as possible. And the detective's voice was trembling for some reason, which did not cause any harm. Together with him, Victor chose the time to walk with Alina. The closed areas of the clinic allowed this to be done, but in order not to be revealed, they went for a walk in the evening. At this time, the entire medical staff watched their favorite TV shows, and Christina could hardly appear because, as far as Victor knew, she liked to visit nightclubs. He also visited there a couple of times, but he didn't like it. A few days later, the detective arrived with the initial information. From his face, it was clear that the news was not very good. Having drunk some water from the glass that was on the bedside table, Dmitri said, I want to warn you right away, Christina is looking at your condition. Why did you take it? I watched her for a long time and systematized all her steps, he answered. And somehow one day, I saw Christina with a lawyer. Well, what about it? Maybe she decided to make a marriage contract, Victor suggested. If only. But I checked everything and found out that this lawyer was digging into your business. With excitement, Dmitri said in his voice, Vidya, I feel that Christina is getting close to your money. After crossing his arms, Victor walked through the room. So, you say, you hired a lawyer to save my condition? Perhaps, Vidya. I haven't figured it out yet, replied the detective. But that's not all I wanted to tell you. Just don't tell me you turned to the funeral agency. Victor asked with a smile on his face. No. Christina was noticed by me with another man. Shook his head and answered Dmitri. She was discussing something with him, but I didn't hear what exactly because it was impossible to get close. Most likely they are in close relations. In short, lovers. Perhaps you are right, Victor thoughtfully said. She was talking to someone on the phone, and maybe it was exactly the man you saw her with. I'm doing this, after all, the detective answered. But I need time. Christina doesn't often blink at people, and it's simply impossible to get closer to her. She became suspicious and constantly changes routes. Here it is what? Presness Victor. So, something really serious is coming up. Then you need to hurry. Otherwise, we can be late. The detective promised to speed up, but together with that, Victor was not happy to receive any information from him. He did not expect that Christina would decide to take over the business. And this despite the fact that she did not know if her fiancé would return to reality or not. The doctor said that days and months could pass on this. And Christina, most likely, decided to force the event so as not to stay with the broken cart. Victor wanted to go to the bank and reveal himself by calling his fiancée. But Alina's advice decided to wait a little longer, especially since Christina had not yet made an attempt to get rid of him. She continued to meet with that man and consult with the lawyers. The detective carefully recorded and reported everything. Unfortunately, he had nothing more to share with him yet. A few more days passed, but no one bothered him. Or rather, they did not come and killed him. As if the bride and her lover had changed their minds. At the same time, the fear still remained, and Victor was waiting for a trick at any moment. He had already mentally prepared himself for the final ending, but could not stand it and decided to stop this comedy. Having called the detective, Victor instructed the nurse Tatiana to call Christine and urgently call her to the clinic. The girl was not happy with the fact that she had to leave important business. She had just started preparing the soil in order to bribe the groom's business under her own name, and then an urgent invitation to the clinic. Christina expected to see anything there, but not the resurrection of Victor. His return to reality did not go according to her plans. Christina hoped that the doctor was not mistaken, and Victor had to spend at least a few months in a coma. With these thoughts, she came to the clinic, opened the door of the ward without any forgiveness, and almost fell to the floor. Victor lay on the bed with his eyes open and smiled, and next to him stood the nurse and fixed the pillow. Christina lost her voice for a minute, not knowing what to say. Then Victor took the situation in his hands and said, "Well, hello, dear. I must have missed you while I was forced to sleep. I can't believe my eyes what miracles medicine is doing." Only Christina could answer. "What the hell is this? I found out here that they also resurrect the dead." Victor decided to joke. "Yes, only in my case, I would not have had to do anything at all. I don't understand what this means." "I wasn't in a coma," Victor answered. "And why did you need it?" "See, I had doubts about your trust." Victor continued the story. "You often got distracted without explaining where and why, secretly talking to someone on the phone. These are my women's affairs. Christina, try to get out of it. I didn't come to you when you talked to your friends." "Yes, that's right," Victor nodded. "But lately, extra costs and incomprehensible acts have been taken into account from your side. So I decided to turn to the comatose patient." Then he told her everything she already knew, especially about talking on the phone in the room, meeting with another man, and attempts to get his business to hand, and intentions to poison. Victor step by step posted facts, confirming by organizing a surveillance. Christina only had time to open her mouth, but he didn't even let her put a word in. Victor was very angry with her, so he hid what the light was on. Finally, he finished with the ghost of evidence of her infidelity and suspicious behavior. After a hard breath, Victor asked, "But what will you say now?" Christina was confused at first, not expecting such a push. But then she took herself in her hands, bowed down, and replied sharply, "I could say a lot if you listen. I listened to you carefully," Victor said in a hazy eyebrows. "You bastard, you've been breaking my life," Christina began. "Your father left my mother pregnant and married your mother. You were already a year old when they got together and began to live together. What are you looking at? Did I surprise you?" "To be honest, yes." "It's hard to breathe out," said Victor. "I don't think I'll have to find out the truth." "You are not his family," said Christina, "and you are not worthy of being a millionaire. Why are you everything and not me?" After these words, the girl cried and sat on the chair on which the nurse had recently been sitting. Tatiana left the bed, realizing that Victor was no longer in danger. But just in case, she removed all the stabbing and cutting objects. She left them alone, but did not completely close the door. Still, she had some fears. Meanwhile, Victor was shocked when he heard Christina's story. He could not believe that the deceased father was not his own. Together with that, certain strangeness in their appearance was present. However, then Victor did not pay much attention to this. His parents were Russians, and he was a shot-in. On the other hand, among relatives there were people with similar hair color, and Victor thought that he took part of the genes from them as inheritance. In any case, another explanation at that moment. Why didn't he find his mother and father, who were Russian? So it turned out that the bride didn't seem to lie when she told him about it. Victor got up from the bed and approached Christine. "I didn't know. I had a dream," putting my hand on her shoulder. "To be honest, I was looking for you on purpose to take revenge." She admitted, "I had to pay to make a statement and find out your exact location. Father left with you to another city to start everything from scratch. And he did it. He created a business, provided you, but forgot about me." "Yes, the situation is hard to breathe," said Victor. "But don't forget what you wanted to kill me." "Sorry, but I was on the verge," Christina tried to explain. "I felt like I was possessed. I didn't understand what I was doing." "It's good that nothing happened so far between us. That's for sure. Otherwise, I wouldn't have forgiven myself for this," Victor said with his hand in his hand. "We both almost made an irreparable mistake and must fix it." "How is that?" After wiping away the tears, Christina carefully asked. "I will connect the lawyers today so that they prepare the transfer of half of my estate. But that's more than I expected." Victor waved his hand. "I don't need anyone else. Besides, you have the right to start a business by law. But I will have a request for you." "What?" "Take care of the state of mind," Victor replied, letting Christine understand that her fate is not indifferent to him. "I hope you understand what my words are for." "Yes, I understand, Vidya." Christine bowed and left the ward. Victor felt some kind of burden on his heart. It seems that everything has been clarified, and at the same time many unresolved questions appeared. And first of all, why did his father, even if not his own, leave his daughter without support? After all, he could not help but understand that the first family also needed money. No, something was wrong here. And apparently, the whole problem was in the mother of Christina. Just so, the father would not have abandoned his first wife with a child. The man Nikolai Sergeyevich was wrong. Victor remembered how he treated him and his mother with kindness. His father, a young man, was spinning around them, trying to provide everything necessary. And the day did not pass until Vidya had a gift. Nikolai Sergeyevich did not regret this money, which said that he respected family values. Soon the lawyers prepared the documents and called Victor. He came to the office where Christina had followed. She was alone, without that man with whom the detective saw her. Victor did not care where the cavalry was, and simply signed an agreement with her about the division of the sphere of influence in business. However, Christina suggested that he leave the decisive word. She was bad at trading, so she preferred to receive only dividends. Victor agreed with her proposal, especially since this was his direct benefit. He remained, in fact, the owner of the company, but at the same time shared some of the profit with Christina. Such a situation of things allowed him to calmly run a business and not worry that any sister would suddenly put everything in a deadlock. He did not even doubt that this could happen. After that, he felt as if a stone had fallen from his soul. Victor honestly shared some of the inheritance with Christina. They buried the war axe that hung over them like a sword had been wet. Her in-laws were delighted that she didn't think of sending him to that world. Yes, at first there were such thoughts, but then the realization came that they would definitely not be able to smooth this out. Most likely, at some point, the weight of the bowl overpowered the fear of losing freedom. Victor forgave Christina, but warned her not to do any machinations. In addition, he listed some of the money he got from his father on her account. Together, they went to his grave, where he was buried next to his mother. Christina stood by the tomb and cried something whispered to her nose. Apparently, she tried to explain to her father, who left them many years ago. After all these events had passed, Victor continued to meet with Alina. They were fine together, despite the fact that she gave herself more than any other man. Alina was an orphan, but not because she grew up in an orphanage, no. It's just that all her relatives died, and none of them remained. Her parents left her very early, very young. The loss of close people put a mark on Alina. She preferred to distance herself from new acquaintances more and more often. However, it was different with Victor. Alina was not afraid to spend her free time with him. They went outside the city on weekends and rested in nature. Victor told her about how he dreamed of finding a family, but nothing came of it. In fact, he projected his thoughts on his relationship with Alina. From the outside, it seemed as if they had never lost each other at all, and this time gap was nothing more than a test of strength. Together with that, Victor did not leave the question of who his real father was in peace. If Nikolai Sergeyevich met his mother when he was already born, why his mother didn't tell him anything? Of course, nobody will tell him about it anymore. Victor only assumed that his biological father probably blamed something on his mother. So she broke up with him to get rid of this man from her life. Thoughts on this subject led him to the fact that his mother was most likely forced to do so, and he had no right to condemn her because she gave him life. And with the appearance of Nikolai Sergeyevich in their family, financial problems also disappeared. And then it was necessary to simply accept in fact that mom made the right choice. At least, Victor missed such concepts as hunger, cold, and poverty. Victor decided to leave the question with his father aside for now. Selina's relationship was increasingly demanded. The love of childhood was tightened with its romanticism and prospects. And it seemed that the final was close. It was possible to think about the wedding. Moreover, Alina somehow hinted that she would like to tie her fate with a strong and willful man. They once walked in the park where there was a small pond with ducks and accidentally found a thick bag on the shore. He moved all over, as if he had survived on his own. Victor carefully went down the grass to see what was there. And what a surprise it was when a little puppy was found in the bag. Victor could not calmly watch it, and the one who approached Alina hardly burst into tears. The puppy looked at them with black eyes and beads, and from one look alone one could be touched. Victor and Alina made a decision for Brachenko. He was not to blame for the fact that the previous owners were so close to him. They were not otherwise bad people, perhaps, but also monsters. But who would throw a pet in a bag in a healthy place? Most likely, they hoped that he would die here in the pond. On the same day, they brought the puppy home, and while Alina bathed him in the bathroom, Victor prepared a treat. The little wool lump happily ate what was in the bowl. Looking at this creature, Victor said with a smile, "Let's call him Jake." "I like it." "I agree," Alina answered. Victor said, "As soon as the monsters come, but now he's safe and he's not threatened by anything." Yes, for him this is the most important thing now. "By the way, how is your in-laws doing there?" All of a sudden, Alina asked. "I don't know," Victor said. "She seems to continue to live with this." "I see only family if you are about the future." Alina smiled and replied, "I also see that, to be honest." Victor supported her. "Then we will move in this direction." They spent the whole day making the puppies get in order. Just in case, they took him to the vet. The doctor examined the pet, did the vaccination, and said that he was normal. In addition, she gave recommendations on how to take care of him better, so that he could quickly regain his weight. The puppy was very skinny. It seems that the former owners, before being thrown out and even starved him with hunger, in general, a new friend lived with Alina and Victor and became something like a baby to them. Jackie finally got over the shock, only a week later. He no longer snored like it was the first days, and did not run around the apartment in a hurry. The pet in the aviary was lying in the basket that Victor bought for him and asked everyone to pet him. Alina did not refuse Jackie in this joy. Another week passed. Victor held several meetings with investors. They turned out to be successful, and favorable contracts were signed. Christina went to the sea with the cavalry and rested there. Alina received a new position as deputy chief physician of the clinic. Some rules were changed with her, and first of all, according to the medical help to socially unprotected citizens, it was meant that she was allowed to receive even homeless people. In this, Alina saw her participation in their lives because no one was insured from such turns of fate. Victor approved her idea and allocated money and resources for these purposes. He became a patron of the clinic and periodically purchased drugs and even equipment there. Slowly, Victor and Alina's life gained all new meanings and led them to make the main decision. On the days Victor was going to make a proposal. However, these plans had to be postponed because one day Alina came home in upset feelings. Victor covered the table and then wondered what had happened. "Do you have any problems at work?" "How do you say?" "I was helpless in front of the unexpected." Alina answered uncertainly. "I don't really understand what you were talking about." Victor said in a hazy eyebrows. "We were brought a man right from the street. I allowed them to be treated." "Yes, I remember." The man whined. So the chief doctor almost whined the rascal. Alina continued. "I had to argue with him for a long time on this matter." "And you defended your right?" Victor was interested. "Yes, but with great difficulty." Alina whined. "But the saddest thing is that this man needs an urgent blood transfusion." "What's wrong with him?" Alina told that the man was brought to lunch. He was found unconscious. And since she herself gave the good to treat homeless people, she had to take this patient. She didn't have any documents with her. But Alina paid attention to the old nail. It seems that they were made in her youth. But the worst thing is that the vagabond was injured, cut to the side. Under her guidance, they operated on him and sewed wounds. Partially, as far as it was possible, his condition was stabilized. However, blood transfusion was required. But he found a rare group. It was not possible to find it among the donor bases. Hearing this, Victor exclaimed, "So I have the same blood." "Are you serious?" Alina asked in a bewildered way. She couldn't know what kind of blood group he actually had. After all, during the time of his being in the clinic, he did not give any tests. "Quite. I know my indicators." Victor was firmly nodding. "And you would like to become a donor?" "Yes, quite." Victor calmly answered. "Well, okay. The procedure must be carried out as urgently as possible. If you have finally decided everything, then we will go to the clinic in the morning." The next day, they came to work together with Kaylin. Victor was slightly worried, but only because it was the first time he had this procedure. He had no other doubts about whether to help or not. Together with that, before the start of the transfer, he looked into the room where the wanderer was lying. The man looked unimportant. The face was pale, and the hands were covered with corals. Most likely, during the wanderer's time, he caught some kind of infection or the body reacted in such a way to the ruined lifestyle. Victor finished the tour and moved to the office. Soon this man was brought there. He was almost nearby all this time while the flood was going on. Victor could see how his blood flowed to the wanderer. Alina said that there were very old things on him, which barely covered the body from the cold. Without a doubt, the man was at the very bottom of the social society. But how did he get there? Until there was a mystery. The procedure was successfully completed, and in a couple of hours Victor returned home. Alina stayed in the clinic, filled out the documents, but after a while she also came and asked the question right off the bat. "Don't you think it's strange that your blood looks like yours?" "No, it doesn't. This happens in nature." The man replied, shaking his head in a negative way. "Maybe so, but somehow it looks strange." Alina continued. "Come on, nothing strange." Victor reassured her. "Think about it, the blood turned out to be similar." At the same time, she still had doubts about the fact that this was just a coincidence. Alina did not believe in coincidence and decided to check everything on the DNA test. There, Alina went to a meeting and promised to prepare the results in a week. All this time, she was waiting for information. The inner feeling did not give her peace. In a week, The head of the laboratory personally called and boasted that Victor and this wanderer were relatives on the straight line. Alina barely had an attack. It's good that Andrei Evgenievich was nearby. He brought the surgeon to his senses. Looking at her excited face, he carefully asked, "Child of his future child? What are you talking about?" Alina was surprised and asked, "So, I thought you were pregnant, and it looked like some kind of hormonal failure," the manager said. "No, I'm not pregnant yet." Shaking his head, Alina answered. "And what was it?" Andrei Evgenievich was not worried. "You will find out about it anyway, so I better tell you." Alina told him the story of the arrival at the wandering group. After finishing her story, she looked closely at the wandering group. "And what should I do now?" "Tell Vitya about it," Andrei Evgenievich answered. "He must know the truth, whatever it is." "Yes, you are right. I will do that." Alina nodded and hurried home. Having learned such news from her, he came to confusion. Apparently, he did not expect that Bombshell would be his direct relative, and if we speak more frankly, then his father. No, not so Victor imagined their meeting. In any case, not with the person who fell to the very bottom of life. On the other hand, it was impossible to say for sure that it was his fault. That is why, to set all the points straight, Victor went to the clinic with Alina. By that time, the man could already move around the ward and communicate with the medical staff. Victor carefully opened the door to the ward and greeted the wanderer. "Good day." "Hello," he answered with a risk. "My name is Victor." He stretched out his hand. "And I, Boris," answered the wanderer, carefully pressing it. "This is the case here. I became a donor and helped you with the transfer," said Victor. "Yes, thank you. The nurse already told me everything." Boris nodded and again stretched out his hand for gratitude. "I will be obliged to you by the coffin of life. I will put a candle for you in the church. But I would like to hear from you how you broke up with Nina Kovalevskaya." The wanderer even trembled when he heard the name and surname of the woman. Having grabbed his heart, he sat on the bed and quietly whispered, "It was so long ago. And yet I wonder," was standing on his Victor. "And why do you need it?" Boris carefully asked. "I am her son," calmly answered Victor. "It can't be. It can't be." After crying, the wanderer said, "It's all my fault. Calm down. Everything is fine. Nobody is going to blame you." Having put his hand on his shoulder, Victor put the wanderer on the bed, and he began to tell about his past, and in the paints and with all the details. It turned out that they had a warm relationship with Nina. They were even going to get married, but soon they broke up for stupidity. Boris was jealous of her for her childhood friend. They had a great fight on this soil, although there was no reason to be jealous. However, Nina told him that she no longer wanted to see him. Boris, after they broke up, was caught in the cage by the hooligan. He beat the son of the rich dad, but there was a reason. He approached the girl and turned her away from her. Boris stood up but did not count the strength. As a result, Bagake paid whoever needed it, and they sent him to prison for a long time. In general, the ex-husband turned out to be a bad man, and Nina decided to completely erase him from her memory. Soon the son was born, whom she called Victor, and the series of life difficulties began. There was no one to help her, so she turned as she could. And only a year later, Nikolai appeared on the horizon. Who didn't see that she already had a child. He fell in love with Nina and offered to live together, and he became Victor's uncle. It can be said that Nikolai recognized the baby as his own son. However, he still did not give him his own surname. The boy remained on the metrics of his mother. But Nina was glad about this, because the difficulties in her life were over. And at that moment, she did not think about Boris anymore, and carefully hid from Nikolai that his father Vitya was a prisoner. It was the only secret that she never revealed even to her husband. After liberation, Boris took up the job. However, he had to start all over again. His parents had died by then, and his relatives had turned away. The former prisoner had to rebuild his life on the brick. He didn't think about visiting his ex-lover. They had a very difficult separation. Besides, Boris didn't want to get into her new family. And then he found out that she died in an accident and finally put an end to it. Moreover, Boris knew nothing about his son. He got into the prison when Nina didn't even have signs of pregnancy. She found out about it only 2 weeks later, but didn't tell him. completely refusing to his father's unfavorable. She didn't want her son to live with the thought that his biological father is a Zek. And then she couldn't be blamed because she acted on circumstances. Victor thought about this topic more than once, and he lacked these links for Rebus to fully form. Now he knew what actually happened between his mother and his own father. As for Boris's injury, he said that some hooligans attacked him in the basement, hit him with a knife, and took all the money he earned in a day. Victor got up from his bed and walked through the room. Alina stood next to the window and did not interfere in the conversation. He looked at one point for a few minutes and then said, "I think we need to forget the past and live the present." "Are you sure, son?" Boris asked carefully. "Yes, absolutely," Victor nodded. "There is no more reason for anger, especially since the truth has been revealed. You both made mistakes and paid for it. I understand that this sounds cynical, but as it is, it's a pity that Mom admitted in her time. She wanted the best." Boris held his father's arms and said, hugging him tightly, Victor said, "I've been waiting for this for so long. I'm sorry, son, for not doing anything." Boris replied, "It's not your fault, because you didn't know about my birth. And most importantly, you're alive." After the discharge from the clinic, Victor took his father to his place and settled in the country house. Jackie brought him there so that it wasn't boring. The father soon found common ground for contact with his son and began to help him. It is clear that he had no knowledge of trade, but the supply from him was excellent. Victor had a powerful support in the face of his own father. At the same time, he did not forget about his father, who did a lot to ensure that Vidya lived completely safe. They all went to the cemetery together and honored their memory. The father silently looked at the tomb and quietly cried. From the granite monument, Nina looked at him as if alive. She smiled as if nothing had happened. Victor specially chose this photo so that Mom didn't look gloomy. Life played with new colors, and soon Victor still made a line of suggestions. The ringed rings finally waited for their time, and everything happened exactly as he planned in the country house. The father from the bottom of his heart congratulated the young people and wished them all the best. In addition, he hinted at what the grandchildren would like to live to see. "It would be a real happiness for me, hugging his son and Alina," said Boris. "We didn't think that way," Victor smiled at Alina's response. A month later, they were scheduled. The wedding was also held in the country house. All the relatives and relatives of their families were invited there. There were so many guests that they had to set tables in the gazebo. But from this, the wedding ceremony became even more grandiose. Victor and Alina were in the center of attention, and all day they received warm words of congratulations as well as gifts, to whom the guests did not hesitate. And after a couple of months, Alina made her family happy with the news of pregnancy. The men were beyond joy. If you like the story, I really hope to see your support with the button on the top right. Thank you, and all the best.